"You do not belong here." The words cut through the noise of the great hall like a blade, sharp and final. Isla froze, her hand still gripping the heavy tray of goblets she had been carrying to the high table. She did not need to turn around to know who had spoken. Leanna's voice had haunted her for years, that particular blend of sweetness and venom that made every insult sound like concern. "The kitchens are that way, Omega, or have you forgotten your place again?" Laughter rippled through. The crowd, soft and cruel, the kind that never quite reached a volume that would draw official rebuke but was loud enough to ensure everyone heard. Isla felt the familiar heat of shame crawl up her neck, staining her cheeks. She kept her eyes down, focused on the worn stone floor beneath her feet, and began to retreat. This was her life. This had always been her life. Invisible until someone needed a target, then suddenly, painfully visible. The great hall of Silvercrest was decorated for the arrival of the Alpha King and his war council. Banners in deep crimson and black hung from the vaulted ceiling, and every surface gleamed with polish and effort. Isla had spent the better part of 2 days helping prepare for this moment, scrubbing and cleaning and arranging, always in the background, always unnoticed. The visiting dignitaries were expected within the hour, and the tension in the air was palpable. This was not a social visit. The Alpha King did not travel to minor territories for pleasantries. When Demon Blackthorn came to your pack, it meant war, alliances, or judgment. Sometimes all three. Isla made it halfway back to the kitchen entrance, when the massive oak doors at the far end of the hall swung open with a force that silenced every conversation instantly. The temperature in the room seemed to drop. She felt it before she saw anything, a pressure that made her chest tighten and her instincts scream at her to run, to hide, to make herself even smaller than she already was. But her feet would not move. She stood there, tray still in hand, as the Alpha King entered Silvercrest territory for the first time in a generation. Demon Blackthorn was not what she expected. The stories painted him as a monster, a beast barely contained in human skin, a warrior who had ended rebellions and crushed challenges with such brutality that his name alone made enemies surrender. But the man who walked through those doors moved with a grace that seemed impossible for someone his size. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with dark hair that fell just past his collar, and eyes that she could not quite make out from this distance, but seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. He wore black, head to toe, with no ornamentation except for a single silver chain around his throat. Behind him came his war council, 6 men and women who looked equally dangerous, each one moving with the precise coordination of soldiers who had fought together for years. Alpha Marcus stepped forward to greet them, his voice booming with false confidence. "Alpha King Blackthorn, Silvercrest welcomes you. We are honored by your presence." Demon did not respond immediately. He stopped just inside the threshold, his head tilting slightly as if listening to something no one else could hear. Then he inhaled. It was a deliberate, measured breath, and Isla watched as his entire body went rigid. The members of his war council noticed immediately, their hands moving to weapons that were suddenly visible beneath their cloaks. The hall held its collective breath. Who prepared this hall? Demon's voice was low, quiet even, but it carried to every corner of the space. There was something in it that made Isla's skin prickle, something ancient and barely controlled. Marcus blinked, clearly thrown by the question. "The Omegas, of course, the household staff. Why do you ask?" Demon did not answer. Instead, he began to walk, not toward the high table where Marcus waited, not toward the display of hospitality that had been so carefully arranged, but into the crowd. People scattered before him like leaves before a storm. His eyes scanned faces, dismissed them, moved on. He was searching for something. No, not something. Someone. Isla realized with growing horror that he was moving in her direction. She took a step backward, then another, but the crowd had closed in behind her, trapping her against a stone column. Her heart hammered so hard she thought it might crack. Her ribs. This could not be happening. There was no reason for the Alpha King to notice her. No reason for him to even know she existed. But he kept coming, his gaze sweeping across the sea of faces until finally, impossibly, it landed on her. The world narrowed to that single moment of contact. His eyes were silver, not gray or blue, but true metallic silver, and they locked onto hers with an intensity that stole the breath from her lungs. He stopped 3 feet away from her, close enough that she could see the faint scar that ran along his jawline, close enough that his scent washed over her like a physical force. Pine and smoke and something wild, something that made every nerve ending in her body come alive in a way she had never experienced. You. The word was not a question. It was a statement, a claim, a recognition that resonated in her bones. Isla could not speak. Her voice had abandoned her entirely, along with any coherent thought. The tray slipped from her numb fingers and clattered to the floor, goblets rolling across the stone in a cacophony that seemed deafening in the sudden silence. No one moved. No one breathed. The Alpha King reached out, and she flinched instinctively, but his hand did not strike. Instead, his fingers brushed against her cheek with a gentleness that was completely at odds with everything she knew about him. "What is your name?" His voice had softened, though the intensity remained. She swallowed hard, forcing her throat to work. "Isla." It came out as barely more than a whisper. "Isla." He repeated it as if testing the shape of it, as if committing it to memory. Then his expression shifted, something almost like wonder crossing his features before it was replaced by a darker, more possessive look. "How is this possible? You have no wolf." It was not an accusation, but there was confusion in his voice and something else. Frustration, perhaps, or disbelief. She shook her head mutely. Everyone knew she had no wolf. That was why she was Omega. Why she had been rejected. Why she lived in the shadows. Demon's hand moved from her cheek to the back of her neck, his palm warm against her skin, and she felt something inside her respond. Not her wolf, because she did not have one, but something deeper, something that had been sleeping for so long she had not known it existed. It stirred, stretched, reached toward him with a desperate hunger that terrified her. Mine. The word came from Demon in a growl that was more animal than man, and the effect on the room was instantaneous. Shocked gasps, frantic whispers, the sound of someone dropping something in the kitchens. Marcus pushed through the crowd, Liana at his side, both of them wearing identical expressions of disbelief. "Alpha King, I think there has been some mistake," Marcus began, his voice strained with the effort of remaining diplomatic. "This Omega is nothing. She has no standing in this pack, no lineage worth mentioning. Surely you cannot mean to claim that." "She is your—" He trailed off, unable or unwilling to finish the sentence. Demon turned his head slowly, his hand still resting on Isla's neck in a gesture that was unmistakably possessive. When he looked at Marcus, the temperature in the room dropped another few degrees. "Are you questioning what I sent? Are you suggesting that I, the Alpha King, do not know my own mate when she stands before me?" The threat in those words was barely veiled, and Marcus blanched. "No, of course not. I would. Never presume to—" Demon cut him off with a gesture. "Then there is no confusion. This woman is mine. The bond may be dormant, her wolf may be hidden, but I know what she is. The question is, why does she not? If you are enjoying this story, do not forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel for more emotional stories like this one." Isla felt the weight of hundreds of eyes on her, felt the judgment and confusion, and, from some, barely concealed envy. This was not possible. Things like this did not happen to women like her. Mates were for wolves with strong bloodlines, for females who could shift and fight and contribute to the pack. She was none of those things. There must be a mistake, she managed to whisper, the words feeling like glass in her throat. Demon's attention snapped back to her, and the intensity of his focus made her knees weak. There is no mistake. My wolf knows you. He has known you from the moment your scent reached me. What I do not understand is why you cannot feel it. Why your wolf does not answer mine. She does not have a wolf, Leanna interjected, her voice dripping with false sympathy. She has been tested multiple times. She is a dud, Alpha King. A genetic dead end. Surely you can scent that much. Demon did not even look at Leanna. His eyes remained fixed on Isla, searching, analyzing. No, there is a wolf. I can sense it. But it is buried, suppressed by something. Magic, perhaps, or trauma. He paused, her jawline in a gesture that sent shivers down her spine. Tell me about your family, your bloodline. Isla shook her head helplessly. I have no family. I was found on the border as an infant, abandoned. The pack took me in out of charity. I have no bloodline, no history. I am nobody. The words tasted bitter, but they were true. She had been telling herself that for 24 years. Demon's expression hardened. Everyone comes from somewhere. Wolves do not simply abandon their young. Without reason. Especially not wolves with the kind of scent signature you carry. He inhaled again. And this time she saw something almost like hunger flash across his features. Old blood. Ancient blood. Whatever you are, Isla, you are not nobody. The hall erupted into chaos. Voices rose in argument and speculation, the careful diplomatic atmosphere shattering like thin ice. Marcus was shouting something about pack records and verification. Leanna was insisting that this was all some elaborate mistake. And the War Council had formed a protective circle around Demon and Isla, their eyes scanning for threats. Through it all, Demon remained focused on her, his hand steady on her neck, his presence overwhelming every sense she had. I am taking you with me, he said quietly, the words meant only for her. Tonight, you will come to the Alpha King's territory, and we will discover the truth of what you are. This, I vow. Panic surged through her. Leave Silvercrest, leave the only home she had ever known, terrible as it was. Go with this man, this stranger who claimed she was his mate based on nothing more than scent? It was insane. It was impossible. I cannot, she whispered. I have duties here, responsibilities. The pack needs... Demon silenced her with a look. The pack has done nothing but fail you. Look at you. You flinch when people approach. You apologize for existing. This is not a life. This is survival, and barely that. I am offering you more. I am offering you truth. And if I refuse? The question surprised her as much as it seemed to surprise him. His eyes narrowed slightly, and for a moment she saw the beast beneath the man, the predator that had earned him the title, War Beast. You will not refuse, because deep down, beneath the fear and the years of conditioning, you know I am right. You have always known you were meant for something more than this. His hand slid from her neck to her hand, his fingers intertwining with hers. The contact sent another jolt of that strange recognition through her, and she gasped. Feel that? He murmured. That is truth. That is destiny, and you can deny it all you want. But your soul knows mine. Marcus pushed past one of the War Council members, his face flushed with anger and something that might have been fear. Alpha King, with all due respect, you cannot simply take one of our pack members without negotiation. There are protocols, agreements between territories. If you wish to pursue a formal courtship, we can discuss terms. But this is abduction. Demon finally released Isla's hand and turned to face Marcus fully. The shift in his demeanor was terrifying. Where he had been almost gentle with her, now he was every inch the Alpha King, the War Beast, the male who had never lost a challenge. Are you truly foolish enough to stand between me and my mate? Do you understand what you are inviting with such words? The hall went deathly silent. Everyone knew what happened to wolves who challenged the Alpha King. The stories were legend. Marcus swallowed hard but held his ground, though Isla could see his hands trembling. I am simply asking that we follow proper procedure. Isla is under Silvercrest protection. She may be Omega, but she is still Pack. Demon smiled, and it was the coldest thing Isla had ever seen. Protection. Is that what you call it? Tell me, Alpha Marcus, when was the last time you ensured this woman ate a full meal? When was the last time you punished someone for abusing her? When was the last time you treated her with even a fraction of the respect due to a Pack member? Marcus opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. No words came, because there were no words. Everyone in that hall knew the truth. Isla had been treated as less than dirt for her entire life, and not one person, not even the Alpha, had ever intervened. That is what I thought, Demon continued, his voice soft and deadly. So do not speak to me of protection, when you have offered none. Do not speak to me of Pack bonds when you have allowed her to be isolated and abused. You have failed in your duty as Alpha, and I am well within my rights to remove her from this toxic environment. Leanna stepped forward, her expression carefully arranged into concern. Alpha King, perhaps Isla should have a say in this. Surely her wishes matter. It was a clever move, Isla realized. Put the decision on her, make it seem like she had agency, but everyone in this room knew what would happen if she agreed to go with Demon. She would be labeled a traitor, someone who had abandoned her Pack for selfish reasons. And if things did not work out with the Alpha King, if this mate bond he claimed was somehow a mistake, she would have nowhere to return to. She would be truly alone. Demon looked at Leanna for the first time, and the contempt in his expression was palpable. Her wishes do matter, which is why I am asking, rather than simply taking. But make no mistake, female. If she chooses to stay in this place that has brought her nothing but pain, I will honor that choice. For now. But I will also investigate why her wolf is suppressed, and if I find that anyone in this Pack had a hand in it, there will be a reckoning. The threat hung in the air like smoke. Leanna paled but said nothing more. Demon turned back to Isla, and his expression softened marginally. The choice is yours. Stay here. Continue to live as you have been, invisible and undervalued, or come with me and discover the truth of what you are. I cannot promise it will be easy. I cannot promise you will like everything you learn. But I can promise that you will be protected, valued, and given every resource to awaken whatever has been sleeping inside you. He paused, his silver eyes holding hers with an intensity that made her soul ache. I can promise that you will never be invisible again. The choice should have been impossible. She barely knew this man. Everything in her life had taught her not to trust, not to hope, not to believe in fairy tales or destined mates or happy endings. But standing there, his scent wrapping around her like a living thing, that strange awakening inside her growing stronger with every second, Isla realized something terrifying. She did not want to stay. She had never wanted to stay. She had simply never believed she had any other option. If I go with you, she said slowly, her voice stronger than she expected. What happens to me if this bond you sense is wrong? If I am not your mate? Demon stepped closer, eliminating the small distance between them, and cupped her face in both hands. The gesture was possessive, but also reverent, as if she were something precious, something worth protecting. Then you will still have a place in my territory. You will still be under my protection. You will still have value, Isla. Because mate bond or not, I do not abandon those under my care. That is my vow to you. Witnessed by everyone in this hall. The sincerity in his voice was undeniable. This was not a casual promise. This was an alpha king making a formal commitment, the kind that could not be broken without dishonor. Isla took a shaky breath and nodded. "Then I will come with you." The words were barely out of her mouth before the hall erupted again, but this time Demon was ready. He pulled her against his chest, one arm banding around her waist, and his power flooded the room like a tidal wave. Every wolf present, including Marcus, dropped their eyes and bared their throats in automatic submission. The pressure was immense, suffocating, the weight of an alpha king who had ruled for decades and had never once been challenged successfully. "She is mine," he said, his voice carrying to every corner of the space. "Anyone who has a problem with that can take it up with me personally. I suspect there will be no takers." No one spoke. No one dared. Demon looked down at Isla, his expression easing back into something almost gentle. "Gather your belongings. We leave within the hour." She almost laughed at that. Belongings? She had nothing worth gathering. A few worn dresses, a hairbrush, a small carved wolf her Omega friend Tessa had made for her 10th birthday. That was the sum total of her possessions. "I have nothing to gather," she admitted quietly. Something dark flashed across Demon's features, rage or sorrow or both. "Then we leave now." He guided her toward the door, his war council falling into formation around them, and Isla looked back once at the only home she had ever known. She saw familiar faces staring after her with expressions ranging from shock to anger, to, in a few cases, envy. She saw Marcus conferring urgently with his beta, saw Liana watching with narrowed eyes and a smile that promised future trouble. And she saw Tessa, her only real friend, standing near the kitchen entrance with tears streaming down her face and a small nod of encouragement. That single nod gave her more courage than anything else. The journey to the Alpha King's territory took 3 days by horseback, and every mile that stretched between Isla and Silvercrest felt both terrifying and liberating. Demon kept her close, ensuring she rode beside him rather than with the supply wagons, and though he did not push her to talk, his presence was a constant reassurance. At night, they camped under the stars, and he would sit with her by the fire, answering her tentative questions about his territory, his pack, his life. He was surprisingly patient, and she found herself slowly, cautiously, beginning to trust him. On the second night, as they sat watching the flames dance, Isla finally asked the question that had been burning in her mind since the moment he had claimed her. "Why me? You are the Alpha King. You could have any female in any territory. Why would fate pair you with someone like me?" Demon was quiet for a long moment, his gaze fixed on the fire. "When," he finally spoke. His voice was thoughtful. "I have lived a long time, Isla. I have fought countless battles, made alliances and enemies, built a kingdom that spans territories most wolves will never see. And through all of it, I have been alone. Oh, I have had companions, partners for a night or a season, but never a mate. Never that bone-deep recognition that tells you this person, this soul, is meant to walk beside you." He turned to look at her, and in the firelight his silver eyes seemed to glow. "When I walked into that hall and caught your scent, it was like every empty space inside me suddenly had a name. My wolf, the part of me that I keep locked down because he is too dangerous, too wild. He went insane. He wanted to tear apart anyone who stood between us. He wanted to carry you away immediately, to hell with diplomacy or protocol. And the human part of me, the part that makes strategic decisions and weighs consequences, that part knew with absolute certainty that you are what I have been waiting for." He reached out and took her hand, his thumb tracing patterns on her palm. "So the question is not why you. The question is, why did it take fate so long to bring you to me? What do you think will happen next? Leave your predictions in the comments below." Isla felt tears prick at her eyes, and she blinked them back furiously. She was not accustomed to being wanted, to being valued. The feeling was overwhelming. I do not know how to be a mate to an alpha king, she whispered. I do not know how to be anything other than what I have always been. Demon squeezed her hand gently. Then we will figure it out together. Because whatever you were in Silvercrest, whatever they made you believe about yourself, that is not who you are. That is who they needed you to be to make themselves feel superior. The real you. The woman whose wolf is buried under layers of suppression and trauma. She is worth discovering, and I intend to help you find her. They reached Blackthorn territory on the afternoon of the third day, and Isla's first glimpse of it stole her breath. Where Silvercrest had been small and insular, carved out of dense forest with a single great hall and scattered cabins, Blackthorn was a city. Stone buildings rose 3 and 4 stories high. Streets were paved with cobblestones, and everywhere she looked, there were wolves going about their business with a confidence and purpose she had never seen. This was not just a pack. This was a civilization. Welcome home, Demon murmured beside her, and she realized he was watching her reaction carefully. The Alpha King's residence was more fortress than house, a massive structure of black stone that dominated the center of the city. Guards snapped to attention as they approached, and Isla noticed that every single one of them was female. Demon saw her surprise and smiled slightly. My personal guard has always been female. They are faster, more strategic, and less likely to let pride cloud their judgment in a crisis. Also, it drives the old-fashioned males in my council absolutely insane, which I consider a bonus. Despite her nerves, Isla found herself smiling at that. Inside, the fortress was surprisingly warm. Fires burned in massive hearths, tapestries covered the stone walls, and the scent of cooking food drifted from somewhere deeper in the building. Demon led her through a maze of corridors until they reached a suite of rooms that took her breath away. The space was larger than the entire kitchen quarters back in Silvercrest, with floor-to-ceiling windows that looked out over the city, a bed big enough for 4 people, and furnishings that spoke of wealth and taste. These are your rooms, Demon said, watching her take it all in. Adjacent to mine, but separate. I want you comfortable, Isla. I want you to have space to breathe and think and decide what you want from this situation. She turned to face him, confusion written across her features. You are not going to, the mate bond, I thought. She trailed off, cheeks heating. Demon's expression softened. I told you that you are mine, and I meant it. But I am not a monster, and I am not your former alpha who would take what he wanted without care for your consent. The bond between us is real, but it is also incomplete because your wolf sleeps. When she wakes, when you feel the pull as strongly as I do, then we will complete the bond. Until that time, you are safe here. You are protected, and you are free to explore who you are without pressure from me. It was the kindness in his words that broke something inside her. Isla felt tears spill over, and before she could stop herself, she was sobbing. Great heaving sobs that shook her whole body, years of pain and loneliness and fear pouring out of her in a flood she could not control. Demon did not hesitate. He pulled her into his arms, one hand cradling the back of her head, the other wrapped firmly around her waist, and he simply held her. He did not tell her to stop crying. He did not ask her what was wrong. He just held her and let her break apart in safety, and that was more than anyone had ever done for her. When the storm finally passed, Isla found herself curled against his chest, exhausted, but oddly lighter. I am sorry, she whispered, her voice hoarse. Do not apologize for being human, he replied, his hand stroking her hair in a soothing rhythm. You have carried too much for too long. It is time you learned to share that burden. He pulled back just enough to look at her, his silver eyes serious. Tomorrow, we begin investigating your past. I have already sent word to my scholars and mages. If your wolf was suppressed, we will find out how and why, and we will wake her. That night, Isla slept in a real bed for the first time in her life, surrounded by softness and warmth. And for the first time in as long as she could remember, she felt safe. She dreamed of running through forests she had never seen, of silver moonlight and wild howls, and of eyes that glowed like molten metal watching over her with fierce protectiveness. When she woke, sunlight was streaming through the windows, and there was a tray of food waiting for her, more food than she would normally eat in a week. A note beside it read simply, "Eat. You are too thin. We will speak after breakfast." The investigation into her past began that very afternoon. Demon assembled a team that included his head scholar, an ancient female wolf named Morna, who had forgotten more history than most wolves would ever learn, and 2 mages, siblings named Kale and Seraphina, who specialized in blood magic and suppression spells. They worked in a tower room filled with books and artifacts, and Isla felt completely out of her depth as they asked her questions, tested her blood, and performed rituals she did not understand. Through it all, Demon remained at her side, his presence a steadying force. It was Morna who made the first breakthrough. 3 days into the investigation, the elderly scholar burst into Demon's private study, where he and Isla were reviewing maps, her eyes bright with excitement. "I found it. The connection. It took me days of cross-referencing old pack records and bloodline documentation, but I found it." She spread a massive leather-bound tome across the desk, her gnarled finger pointing to a specific entry. Isla is not just anyone. She carries the bloodline of the Silver Moon. Pack. The name meant nothing to Isla, but Demon went very still beside her. "The Silver Moon Pack was wiped out 25 years ago," he said slowly. Betrayed from within and slaughtered by a coalition of neighboring territories who feared their power, they were direct descendants of the first wolves, with abilities that went beyond normal shifting. It was one of the great tragedies of our generation. Morna nodded grimly. "Yes, but what if not everyone died? What if someone managed to hide? A child, to place her somewhere she would be overlooked, invisible. Someone suppressed my wolf on purpose," Isla whispered, the pieces finally clicking together. "They hid me in plain sight." Morna's expression was sympathetic. "More than that, child. They bound your power so thoroughly that even you did not know it existed. The spell work is masterful, layered with protections and fail-safes. Whoever did this was trying to keep you alive, but they also ensured you would never be able to access your heritage." Demon's hand found Isla's, his grip tight. "Can it be undone?" Kale and Seraphina stepped forward, and Kale spoke, his voice serious. "Yes, but it will not be pleasant. The magic has been in place for over 2 decades. Unraveling it will be painful. And there is no guarantee what will happen when her wolf finally wakes. Silver Moon blood is powerful. She could be extraordinary, or the sudden influx of power could overwhelm her. If you want to see how this story ends, make sure you are subscribed with notifications on. I want to do it." Isla's voice was steady, surprising even herself. "I have spent my entire life being nothing. I want to know who I really am, even if it is dangerous." Demon studied her for a long moment, then nodded. "Then we do it. But we do it carefully, with every precaution in place. I will not lose you to this, Isla. Not when I just found you." The ritual was scheduled for the full moon, 3 days away. In the meantime, Demon insisted she eat. Well, rest, and prepare herself mentally for what was to come. He also began teaching her about her heritage, about the Silver Moon Pack and their legendary abilities. They had been able to command other wolves with their voice, to heal mortal wounds, to see truth through lies. They had been peacekeepers and warriors, respected and feared in equal measure. "If I am really one of them," Isla asked one evening as they sat in his study, "why would someone hide me? Why not raise me as Silver Moon? Teach me what I am?" Demon was quiet for a moment, then reached out to tuck a strand of hair behind her ear. because whoever killed your pack would have hunted down any survivors, hiding you, suppressing your wolf, making you unremarkable. That was the only way to keep you alive. Someone loved you enough to sacrifice your future for your survival. The thought made her chest ache. Somewhere out there, someone had made the hardest choice imaginable for her, and now she would finally honor that sacrifice by becoming who she was meant to be. The night of the full moon arrived with clear skies and a massive silver orb hanging low over Blackthorn territory. The ritual would take place in the sacred grove, a clearing deep in the forest where the oldest trees grew, and the veil between the physical and spiritual worlds was thin. Isla dressed in simple white robes as instructed, and Demon escorted her through the city, his war council, and the mages accompanying them. She was surprised to see that much of the pack had turned out, lining the streets to watch her pass. There was curiosity in their faces, but also something else. Hope, maybe. Or anticipation. In the grove, a circle had been prepared with candles and herbs, symbols drawn in the earth that glowed faintly with magical energy. Kale and Seraphina stood on opposite sides, their hands already raised and chanting. Demon led Isla to the center of the circle and cupped her face in his hands. Whatever happens in there, know that. I am here. My wolf is here. If your wolf wakes and does not know how to control all that power, we will anchor you. You are not alone in this, Isla. You will never be alone again. She nodded, unable to speak past the lump in her throat, and stepped into the circle. The moment she crossed the boundary, power slammed into her like a physical blow. She gasped, staggering, and the chanting grew louder. She could feel the magic wrapping around her, searching, finding the places where her wolf had been bound and beginning to unravel them one thread at a time. It felt like being unmade and remade simultaneously, like every cell in her body was vibrating at a frequency that should not be possible. Pain came next, white-hot and all-consuming, and she screamed. Through the haze of agony, she felt Demon trying to reach her, felt his power pushing against the barrier of the circle, but the mages held him back. This was something she had to endure alone. The bindings began to break. First one layer, then another, then a cascade, as the spell that had held her wolf dormant for 24 years finally shattered. The pain intensified to the point where she thought she might die from it. And then suddenly, abruptly, it stopped. In the silence that followed, Isla felt something stir inside her. Something massive and ancient, and utterly wild. Her wolf opened eyes that had never seen the world, stretched muscles that had never run, and howled with a voice that shook the trees. The sound was not like any wolf howl Isla had ever heard. It was deeper, layered with power and fury and joy, and every wolf in Blackthorn territory answered it. Isla's body convulsed, and she felt the shift begin. But this was not the smooth, practiced shift of experienced wolves. This was violent and chaotic, her bones breaking and reforming, her skin stretching and sprouting fur, her senses exploding with input she did not know how to process. She heard Demon roaring for the mages to help her, felt more magic wrap around her like a safety net. And then finally, blessedly, her wolf took over. The shift completed, and she stood in the center of the circle on 4 legs for the first time in her life. Everything was different. Colors were muted, but smells were overwhelming. A symphony of information that told her more about her surroundings than sight ever could. She could hear heartbeats, dozens of them, and distinguish between them. She could taste the magic in the air, feel the pull of the moon like a physical tether. And most overwhelming of all, she could feel Demon, not just his presence, but his emotions, his fear for her, his pride, his overwhelming joy that she was finally whole. The mate bond that had been one-sided for days suddenly snapped into place with enough force to drive her to her knees. Mine. The thought came from her wolf, fierce and possessive. Hours. And Isla, for the first time in her life, agreed completely. Demon crossed the circle the moment the mages dropped the barrier, shifting into his own wolf form as he did. He was massive, easily twice her size, his fur so black it seemed to absorb light, and those silver eyes blazing with intensity. He circled her once, scent marking, claiming, and then pressed his forehead to hers in a gesture of such tenderness that it made her wolf whine. "Welcome, little moon." The words came through the mate bond, clear as spoken language. "I have waited for you." They ran that night, just the two of them, through forests that seemed to open before them and welcome them home. Isla's wolf was fast and agile, her silver fur catching moonlight and making her glow like something from legend. Demon stayed beside her, never pushing, always protective. And for the first time in her life, Isla understood what it meant to be free. They ran until dawn began to paint the sky, and then they returned to the sacred grove, where the mages and war council waited. The shift back to human was easier with her wolves. Cooperation. And Isla found herself kneeling on the forest floor, naked and exhausted but more alive than she had ever felt. Someone draped a cloak around her shoulders. And then Demon was there, pulling her into his arms. He had shifted back as well, and she could feel the mate bond humming between them, complete now, unbreakable. "You are magnificent," he murmured against her hair. "Your wolf is perfect, powerful, everything I knew she would be." Isla clung to him, tears streaming down her, but these were tears of joy rather than pain. Morna approached them, her weathered face split by a huge grin. Silver moon bloodline confirmed, and not just any silver moon. "Child, your wolf's coloring, that silver luminescence that was only carried by the royal line. You are not just silver moon, you are their princess, the last of the royal family." The words should have been overwhelming, but somehow they felt right. They felt true. Isla had spent her entire life being told she was nothing, and now she was discovering she came from one of the most powerful bloodlines in Lycan history. The irony was not lost on her. The return to Blackthorn City was different from their initial arrival. This time, Isla walked beside Demon as an equal, her head high, her wolf purring contentedly in her mind. The pack gathered to greet them, and she could feel their respect, their curiosity, their acceptance. This was what it meant to belong. This was what she had been denied her entire life. Demon addressed the pack formally, presenting her as his mate and as Silver Moon royalty, and the howls of approval that followed echoed through the territory for hours. But the joy of her awakening was tempered by reality. If Isla was Silver Moon royalty, then the wolves who had destroyed her pack 25 years ago would want her dead. Demon called his war council together that very evening, and they began planning for the inevitable conflict. "They will come for her," Demon said, flatly, his hand resting on Isla's shoulder as they stood around the strategy table. "The moment word spreads that a Silver Moon heir lives, every territory that participated in the massacre will see her as a threat. They will want to finish what they started." Thorn, Demon's second in command, and one of his most trusted warriors, nodded grimly. "We need to know who was involved. The betrayal came from within the pack structure, which means there was a network. That network might still exist." Isla spoke up for the first time, her voice quiet but determined. "Then we find them, we expose them, and we make sure they cannot hurt anyone else." Every eye in the room turned to her, and she saw approval in most of them. Demon squeezed her shoulder gently. "We will. But first, we make you untouchable. Tomorrow, we complete the mate bond publicly. I claim you before the entire kingdom, and anyone who wants to harm you will have to go through me first." The mating ceremony was planned for the following evening, a full pack gathering that would formalize what they both already knew in their souls. Isla spent the day being prepared by Demon's household staff, bathed in scented oils, dressed in a gown of silver silk that matched her wolf's fur, her hair arranged in intricate braids. She barely recognized herself in the mirror. Gone was the timid Omega who had spent her life invisible. In her place stood a woman who radiated confidence and power, whose eyes held the silver glow of her wolf, even in human form. When she descended the stairs to the great hall where the ceremony would take place, the gathered wolves fell silent. Demon waited for her at the altar, dressed in formal black, and the expression on his face when he saw her was something she would treasure forever. Wonder and desire and possessive pride all mixed together. She walked to him through a pathway lined with candles, and when she reached his side, he took her hand in his touch sending sparks of electricity through her skin. "You are breathtaking," he whispered, low enough that only she could hear. The ceremony itself was ancient, led by Morna, who recited words in the old language that had bound mates together for millennia. They exchanged vows, their voices steady and sure, and when Demon marked her, his teeth sinking into the junction of her neck and shoulder, Isla felt the mate bond solidify into something unbreakable. She marked him in return, tasting his blood on her tongue, and the rush of power and emotion that flooded through their connection was overwhelming. They were no longer two separate beings. They were a unit, a partnership, two halves of a greater whole. If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who loves epic romance. Tell me in the comments, did you see this ending coming? The celebration lasted deep into the night, with food and music and dancing, and for the first time in her life, Isla was at the center of it all in the best possible way. She danced with Demon, with members of his war council, with wolves from across the territory who wanted to pay their respects to their new Luna Queen. And through it all, she felt her wolf's contentment, the sense of finally being where she belonged, with who she belonged to. But even in the midst of joy, she knew this was just the beginning. Somewhere out there, the wolves who had destroyed her family were plotting. They would come for her, and when they did, she would be ready, because she was not the helpless Omega they expected. She was Isla Silvermoon, last of the royal line, mate to the Alpha King, and she would not hide anymore. She would fight. She would protect. And she would ensure that the legacy of her family was not lost. The war beast had recognized her scent, and the pack now knew the truth. But the rest of the world was about to discover that the girl they thought they had erased had returned, stronger than ever, and ready to reclaim everything that had been stolen from her.